try right now for the next 5 seconds to think about absolutely nothing. Let's just take a pause and try it.
It is so much harder than it sounds.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't do it, could you? Even if you pictured like a vast black void or a completely empty white room, you were still thinking about the concept of a void.
Exactly. You're turning nothing into a something.
Right. And if you are someone who spends time meditating or, reading philosophy or trying to cultivate any kind of mindfulness, you probably know how frustrating that is. You are constantly told to clear your mind.
Which is pretty much the golden rule of modern wellness, right?
Yeah. But today, we are going to explore why trying to empty your mind is, well, it's actually ruining it.
Okay.
Let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to fundamentally rethink the mechanics of our own inner world using a 2018 lecture from philosophical teacher Acharya Prashant.
And we should establish right away that we are stepping outside the realm of clinical psychology today. Prashant's lecture doesn't rely on neuroscience or, cognitive behavioral frameworks. It's a provocative, deeply philosophical dissection of the difference between what we call consciousness and what we call awareness.
So no heavy clinical jargon.
Right, none of that. He communicates this through striking analogies that force you to really look at the actual machinery of your daily experience. He is essentially challenging people who consider themselves advanced practitioners of mindfulness, arguing that they are fundamentally misunderstanding the tool they're working with.
Which is why we need to start by defining what that tool actually is. I mean, if we are ever going to step back from the chaos of our daily thoughts, we have to look closely at what consciousness is actually doing.
Yeah, we have to define the terms.
Prashant sets up a foundational rule that sounds simple, but it completely shatters the way most of us approach meditation. He states that consciousness is its content.
Right. The premise is that there's no thought without an object. The mind is, it's entirely defined by what it contains in any given moment. You cannot think about nothing.
Okay, so how does he explain that?
Well, to illustrate this, Prashant uses the analogy of a glass of water. Imagine a physical glass resting on a table.
Okay, got the glass.
That glass represents your consciousness.
Okay.
And the water inside it represents the contents of that consciousness.
So like the memories, the ambient noise in the room, the anxiety about an upcoming work presentation?
Exactly. The grocery list, all of it. All of these objects have been poured into the glass from the outside world, and the glass exists solely to hold those objects.
So hearing this analogy, someone in his audience naturally asks the question we are all thinking. She basically says, wait, if the water is the stress and the noise and I just pour all that water out,
right,
don't I get a clean, empty consciousness? And honestly, isn't that the entire premise of the modern wellness industry? You go on a silent retreat, you tip the glass over, you pour out the stress, and you sit there enjoying your pristine, empty glass.
What's fascinating here is his response to her. He shuts that idea down completely.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. He argues that an empty consciousness is a biological and philosophical impossibility. If you want true emptiness, you don't just empty the glass, you have to throw away the glass entirely.
Throw the whole thing away.
Yes, because let's look at the physics of it. If you pour the water out of a physical glass, it doesn't actually become empty. Air immediately rushes in to fill the space.
Right, because nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly the same principle applies to the mind. Empty consciousness is an oxymoron, because consciousness is an objective faculty.
Meaning it needs an object to exist.
Right, it requires an object, so it behaves like a low-pressure zone in a weather system. If you manage to temporarily push out your stressful thoughts, you haven't achieved lasting peace. You have merely created a vacuum.
And vacuums are aggressive.
Very aggressive. It will ruthlessly suck in anything and everything from its surrounding environment to feed itself.
The mind doesn't have a filter that says, I only want high-quality, serene thoughts to enter my newly created vacuum.
No, not at all.
It just pulls in whatever happens to be nearby. You sit down to meditate, you push out the thoughts about your job, and suddenly you are agonizing over a conversation you had 5 years ago.
Or you become hyper-fixated on the sound of the refrigerator humming.
Yes. The mind needs an object like lungs need oxygen. Consciousness and its contents are totally inseparable.
Which means the contemporary strategy of trying to perfectly sanitize or empty our consciousness while still remaining firmly entrenched inside it is fundamentally flawed.
Because you're still holding the glass.
Exactly. You are just creating a temporary void, sitting there waiting for the next gust of wind to blow random debris into your glass.
Since we know the mind aggressively acts like a vacuum, our modern psychological strategy of just trying to clean it up seems doomed to fail. We are basically fighting gravity.
We really are.
So if we can't clean the mind and we can't empty it, what is the alternative? This brings us to Prashant's blistering critique of intellectuals and the psychological establishment.
Yeah, this part is intense. To explain why our current methods fail, he introduces the master and slave metaphor.
Okay, break that down for us.
In this dynamic, consciousness, which is the chaotic, grasping mind we just described, is the slave. It's conditioned by society, it acquires terrible habits, and it's highly erratic. Truth, or what he refers to as the Lord or the ultimate, is the master.
So the mind is the slave, truth is the master.
Right. And this highlights the grand error of modern intellectuals, psychologists, and neurologists. They are exclusively obsessed with the slave.
They just focus entirely on the mind.
They do. They observe that the slave is misbehaving, throwing tantrums, and creating anxiety. And their solution is to sit down with the slave and attempt to teach it good manners.
Right, let's fix the slave's behavior.
They try to educate it, soothe it, modify it. But no matter how much you educate a slave or how many cognitive behavioral tools you give it, it remains a slave.
It never magically transforms into the master.
Never. The mystic, however, takes a completely different approach.
What does the mystic do?
The mystic ignores the slave entirely. If you want to handle an unruly slave, you don't sit down and negotiate with it, you go straight to the master.
Wow, just bypass the mind completely.
Exactly. The mechanism here is one of attention and authority. When you place your attention entirely on the master, the higher truth, you starve the slave of the attention it desperately needs to survive.
Because the slave feeds on your attention.
Right. Once you are in the presence of the master, one single look from the master is enough to discipline the slave instantly. The lesser authority naturally falls in line under the presence of the greater authority.
So what does this all mean for us? It means we are wasting our finite energy trying to outmaneuver our own minds. And Prashant uses this analogy that completely changes how you view overthinking.
Oh, the broken car analogy.
Yes, he compares trying to fix the mind with the mind to trying to fix a broken car. Imagine you are driving a total junker. The engine is completely collapsed, smoke is pouring out from under the hood, and you are stranded.
Sounds awful.
Right. And your brilliant plan to get this broken car to a mechanic in the next city
Is to drive it there.
is to drive it there. You are attempting to use the services of the broken machine to repair the broken machine.
It's totally absurd when you frame it like that.
It is. Think about the last time you were lying awake in bed at 2 a.m, flooded with anxiety about a decision. You try to logically outthink the anxiety, you weigh the pros and cons, you try to rationalize with yourself.
But you are using the exact same broken thinking machine that generated the anxiety to try and cure the anxiety.
Exactly. If the machine was capable of fixing itself, it wouldn't have generated the panic in the first place.
It's a profound structural trap. We demand that the intellect understand the intellect, fully aware that the intellect we are relying on is currently malfunctioning.
We're asking the disease to act as the physician.
Right. But if the mystic's approach is the actual fix, if going to the master is that effective, why do we fight it so hard?
That's the big question. Why do so many experienced mindfulness practitioners, incredibly smart people, intellectuals, completely reject this surrender? Why do we insist on keeping our heads under the hood of the broken car?
Well, the intellect resists because it faces a terrifying dilemma. The ego, which derives its entire identity from the mind, absolutely loathes the unknowable.
It hates what it can't understand.
Completely. For the ego, accepting that there is an immense, unknowable truth operating beyond its grasp means accepting its own irrelevance. Prashant makes the argument that human beings are actually far more terrified of psychological death than they are of physical death.
Wait, psychological death, meaning the death of the ego.
Yes. The realization that I, as this grasping, analyzing, problem-solving mind, am not the center of reality.
That is terrifying for the ego.
The psychological life is the life of the ego. The ego can tolerate almost any hardship, any rigorous meditation schedule, or any complex philosophy, as long as it gets to be the entity doing the understanding and the conquering.
So the ego says, I will adopt the most difficult scientific model. I will read the densest academic theory, but I will not accept mysticism.
Right. I will not accept the unknowable. Because the unknowable, by definition, cannot be conquered by the intellect. If the intellect cannot conquer it, the intellect feels useless.
And this creates a wild paradox among people who pride themselves on being intellectuals. Prashant highlights the irony of people who wear their open-mindedness like a badge of honor.
This part is so revealing.
He suggests that the people who claim to be the most liberal, the most progressive, and the most open-minded are often, in reality, the most narrow-minded.
How so? Like, what is the mechanism behind that?
Well, their minds are only open to concepts that fit safely inside a human mind. They refuse to consider the possibility of a truly immense, unknowable truth. They curate their reality.
Right, they put boundaries on what they will accept.
Yeah, when they say, I'm open to everything, what they actually mean is, I'm open to everything I can categorize, analyze, and comprehend. They won't allow anything genuinely immense to enter, because their mental framework is actually quite rigid and narrow.
Yeah.
They only let little, manageable intellectual concepts into their little minds.
That is a brilliant defense mechanism of the ego. It disguises its severe limitations as a virtue of discernment.
It really does.
And to really drive home how ill-equipped the intellect is for this task, Prashant uses the metaphor of a child's finger.
Yes, the pinky finger.
Right. Imagine a child who becomes obsessed with the idea of moving the Himalayan mountains.
As you do.
Right. And to achieve this, the child starts exercising their little pinky finger. They work it out obsessively every single day. Eventually, they develop a highly muscular, very strong little finger, and they march up to the Himalayas, fully expecting to move the mountain with it.
Doesn't matter how strong the finger is, it's just the wrong tool for the job.
Exactly. The intellect is that muscular little pinky finger. People spend decades at universities reading thousands of books, debating complex philosophies, and building up this incredibly strong muscular intellect.
Yeah.
And then they try to use that specific tool to grasp ultimate truth or devotion or surrender. You cannot move the Himalayas with a finger.
Because the intellect simply did not evolve biologically or spiritually to grasp the infinite.
Right.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here, because this is where the theory hits the pavement of actual daily life.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the intellect is just a child's useless finger, and our consciousness is a chaotic vacuum, and the mind is a slave throwing a tantrum,
Yeah.
where does that leave you and me? Wait, practically speaking, how do I throw away the glass and still do my taxes?
Good question.
How do I navigate a stressful meeting at work without my mind? Isn't some level of consciousness required just to function in society?
This raises an important question, and it is where Prashant introduces the critical functional distinction between consciousness and awareness. Up until now, we have been talking about consciousness.
The glass, the contents, the slave.
Right. But the foundation underlying that consciousness is awareness. Pure consciousness, which he describes as zero consciousness, is awareness.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When I first read about throwing away the glass, I thought the goal was to somehow, lobotomize myself and destroy my consciousness to find peace.
Which sounds terrible.
It does. But he explicitly states that being aware does not mean you have to destroy consciousness. In fact, you can't. Consciousness will continue to exist and operate as long as your physical body is alive.
You have to pay rent, you have to buy groceries, you have to remember your passwords.
Exactly. All of that requires the machinery of consciousness.
So the alternative to destroying it is learning how to reposition yourself in relation to it.
You just step back. You maintain what he calls an arm's length distance. You stop trying to play mechanic to the broken car.
Just let the car run.
Right. You don't try to fix the stupid consciousness. You let it be busy with its own little matters, let it worry about the grocery list, let it process the stressful meeting.
But you, the true observer, are standing an arm's length away, simply watching the machine run.
That is awareness. It is not about draining the vessel of its water. It is about recognizing that you are not the vessel. The continuous choice. You can abide quietly in awareness, or you can dive in and fool around in the domain of consciousness.
I love that phrase. Fooling around in the domain of consciousness perfectly strips the ego of its manufactured self-importance.
It really minimizes it, doesn't it?
Yeah. When you are agonizing over a perceived slight from a coworker, or obsessively planning for a future scenario that might never happen, you aren't doing important, necessary work. You are just fooling around in the messy vacuum.
You're playing in the dirt.
Right. Awareness is the act of stepping back and observing the gears turning without getting your hands caught in them.
I understand the mechanism of stepping back in theory, but how do we practically take that step back to an arm's length? Where does this awareness actually live?
Yeah, that's the real challenge.
I mean, if I can't think my way into it and I don't need to go sit on a mountaintop to find it, where is it?
Prashant's answer to this is perhaps the most visceral part of the entire discussion. He states that truth is not miles away. It isn't at the end of a decades-long spiritual quest or hidden in a monastery. It is just one step behind you.
One step. But it is the most terrifying step a human being can take. He paints this vivid picture. Imagine you are standing on the very edge of a cliff.
Okay.
You are looking forward. Everything in front of you is solid ground. You can see the terrain. You understand the rules of gravity there. You know how to walk, how to navigate, how to survive.
It's familiar.
But right behind your heels,
Is an abyss.
it is pure empty space. It is the absolute unknown.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this cliff metaphor perfectly explains why the ultimate truth feels so completely inaccessible to us, even though it is hovering right there.
Yeah, why is it so hard to grasp?
Because we are fundamentally obsessed with the solid ground.
We just keep walking forward. We think progress means covering more ground.
Exactly. We assume the solution must be out there on the terrain we understand. You can take 1,000,000 steps forward on that solid ground. You can read 1,000,000 more books, try dozens of different therapeutic modalities, adopt a completely new lifestyle.
But structurally, nothing fundamentally changes.
Nothing changes. You are still operating in the exact same dimension. The terrain of the intellect is the same. The physics of your ego are exactly the same.
Taking 1,000,000 steps forward is just rearranging the furniture in the domain of consciousness.
Right. But taking that one single step backward into the abyss, it changes everything. It alters the entire dimension. It changes the physics of your reality, and it fundamentally changes you.
You cannot take that step backward into the unknown and remain the person you were when you were standing on the solid ground.
And that is why it feels impossibly difficult. It requires ultimate surrender. Your ego, your intellect, your highly trained little pinky finger, they all look at that abyss and sound the alarm.
They scream, "There is no ground there. We will fall. This is annihilation."
Because instinctively, the mind knows there is no ground behind you. There is absolutely nothing for the intellect to grasp onto in the abyss.
Nothing at all.
And the ego would rather walk endlessly on the frustrating, broken, anxiety-inducing ground than surrender to the free fall of awareness.
It completely reframes the entire concept of spiritual or mental progress.
Yeah.
We're conditioned to believe we need to march forward, climb higher, achieve a clearer mind.
Always moving forward.
But the truth is, all our relentless marching forward is just a sophisticated distraction technique. It's a way for the ego to avoid looking at the abyss right behind our heels.
That's profound.
Seekers have wondered for centuries why the ultimate truth is so hard to find when it's supposedly everywhere. Prashant is telling us it's not hard to find because it's far away. It's hard to find because to touch it, you have to stop looking at the ground.
You have to consent to the psychological death of the ego. You have to willingly let go of the glass of water, step away from the smoking engine of the broken car, and allow yourself to fall backward into awareness.
Wow. So let's tie all these threads together. We started this deep dive with a simple glass of water, discovering that our attempts to empty our minds are biologically flawed because consciousness operates like a ruthless vacuum.
It will always suck the noise of the world right back in.
Right, and we saw that trying to fix our erratic minds using those same erratic minds is as absurd as trying to drive a car with a collapsed engine to the mechanic.
We explored how our intellect, no matter how highly educated or muscular, is just a child's finger trying to move the Himalayas. It is a tool completely ill-equipped to grasp the immensity of truth, which is why the ego fights so hard to reject the unknowable.
And we discovered that the actual way out isn't to destroy the mind or the ego, but to maintain an arm's length of awareness, to stop identifying with the slaves throwing a tantrum and let the master do the work.
Leaving you with a final thought to consider long after this deep dive ends. We have spent all this time talking about the broken car of the mind and the necessity of stepping back to an arm's length to observe it functioning. But if awareness is simply the act of stepping back to watch the mind and the mind is not you, then who or what is actually doing the observing?
Oh, that's a good question.
If you are the one quietly watching the broken car from a distance, who are you?